It's cute, it's simple, and it's one of the most beloved cars in history. But what if I told you the Volkswagen Beetle was born from the mind of a dictator? That its creation is tied to war, propaganda, and forced labor? Beneath its cheerful curves lies a story most people have never heard. A story so dark, so bizarre, it almost erased the Beetle from existence before it even began. From Nazi Germany to hippie culture, from battlefield vehicles to floating like a cork, the Beetle's journey is anything but ordinary. This isn't just a car. It's a symbol of power, survival, reinvention, and controversy. Here are 12 shocking secrets behind the Volkswagen Beetle, the car that went from Hitler's propaganda machine to the world's most unexpected peace icon. 1. Hitler's dream car. The Beetle wasn't born in a boardroom or a design studio. It was born in the mind of Adolf Hitler. In the 1930s, as Nazi Germany tightened its grip on power, Hitler had a vision, a car for the common man. Affordable, reliable, and simple enough for every German family. He called it the Volkswagen, which literally means people's car. To bring that dream to life, he turned to none other than Ferdinand Porsche, the engineering genius behind some of the most iconic machines ever built. Together, they created a car that would serve not just as transportation, but as a symbol of Nazi technological superiority. The car was officially named the KDF wagon, short for Kraft durch Freude, or Strength Through Joy, a slogan lifted straight from Nazi propaganda. But there was nothing joyful about what was coming. The government even convinced citizens to pay in advance for their cars through a state-run savings program. Thousands signed up. But what they didn't know was that their money would help fund the rise of a war machine instead. And this so-called car of the future? It was about to vanish before it ever really hit the road. 2. Vanishing promises. Just as the Beetle was about to roll into German garages, the world went to war, and everything changed. In 1938, over 300,000 citizens had already prepaid for Hitler's so-called people's car, trusting the promise of affordable freedom on four wheels. But that promise vanished almost overnight. The massive Wolfsburg factory, built specifically for Beetle production, was taken over by the Nazi regime. Civilian car manufacturing was halted, and instead of family vehicles, the plant churned out military machines like the Kübelwagen and Schwimmwagen, strange-looking utility vehicles designed for war, not peace. And those families who invested their hard-earned money, they never received their cars. Not one. The savings program collapsed, and only a few dozen prototype Beetles ever left the line before the factory was bombed and the dream buried under rubble. It looked like the Beetle would die as just another failed piece of Nazi propaganda. But history wasn't finished with it yet. Next up, the forgotten British officer who saved the Beetle from extinction. 3. The British officer who saved the Beetle. By the end of World War II, the Volkswagen factory was a smoldering shell, bombed, stripped, and filled with unexploded weapons. Most believed it was finished, just like the Nazi regime that built it. No one saw value in the strange little car Hitler once championed. No one except one British Army officer. In 1945, Major Ivan Hurst arrived in Wolfsburg to inspect the ruins. He wasn't a corporate executive or a car designer, just a man with a sharp eye and a sense of possibility. Amid the wreckage, he found a dusty prototype of the Beetle and saw something others didn't. When British officials tried to hand the entire Volkswagen operation to Ford for free, Ford executives laughed. General Motors and Fiat rejected it too, calling the car worthless. But Hurst? He doubled down. He ordered 20,000 Beetles to be built for the British military, reviving the factory from the brink of collapse. That single decision didn't just save Volkswagen, it saved the Beetle from total extinction. What was once a failed Nazi project was now on the road to becoming a post-war miracle. But not everything about that factory's history could be washed away so easily. Next, the Beetle's darkest secret, one that stayed buried for decades. 4. The Beetle's darkest secret behind the Beetle's resurrection was a truth few talked about, a truth buried under decades of silence and steel. During World War II, the very factory that would one day produce millions of cheerful, peace-loving Beetles became a site of human suffering. More than 15,000 forced laborers, including prisoners of war and civilians from occupied countries, were made to work at the Volkswagen plant under brutal conditions. They endured starvation, physical abuse, and endless shifts on the assembly lines. Many didn't survive. The factory even had its own satellite camp tied to the larger Nazi concentration camp system. And yet, for decades, this horrifying part of the Beatles' past remained hidden from the public. It wasn't until the 1990s, over 50 years later, that Volkswagen formally acknowledged its role in these atrocities. A compensation fund was finally created for surviving laborers. But the scars couldn't be erased. This chilling legacy stands in stark contrast to the car's later image as a symbol of peace and rebellion. Because sometimes, even the most beloved machines carry a past that's anything but innocent. Next, how the Beetle got its name, and why Volkswagen tried to avoid it. 5. The name that wasn't supposed to be Volkswagen never intended to call it the Beetle. In fact, when the car was first introduced, it had a much colder, more technical name, the Volkswagen Type 1. And during the Nazi era, it went by an even harsher title, the KDF wagon, stamped with the weight of propaganda. But after the war, something unusual happened. People started calling it the Beetle, inspired by its round, bug-like shape. It wasn't official. It wasn't even approved. But it stuck and it spread. In Brazil, they called it the Fusca. In France, Coccinelle. In Mexico, Vocho. No matter the language, the world gave this car a new identity, one that had nothing to do with its dark origins. Ironically, Volkswagen resisted the name for years, preferring sterile designations over public sentiment. But in the end, they gave in. Because while corporations brand their products, it's the people who decide what those products mean. The Beetle wasn't just renamed. It was reborn. Next, one of the Beetle's strangest features, it could actually float. 6. The Beetle that could float. It sounds like a myth, but early Volkswagen Beetles could actually float. Not like a boat, but just enough to survive a flooded road or a sudden plunge into a river. The Beetle was never designed to be amphibious, but its rounded underbody, tightly sealed panels, and lightweight frame created something close to a watertight shell. During the 1940s and 50s, drivers around the world reported their Beetles bobbing on water like a cork, staying afloat just long enough to get out safely. This strange ability wasn't by accident. During the war, the same Beetle platform had been used to build the Schwimmwagen, an actual amphibious vehicle for the German military. That engineering DNA, built for rivers and swamps, unintentionally carried over into the civilian model. In one remarkable case, a driver who plunged into deep water was able to escape without the car sinking. The Beetle floated just long enough to save his life. No, it wasn't a boat. But this bizarre bit of design helped cement the Beetle's reputation as nearly indestructible. Next, the heart of the Beetle, an engine so simple it didn't even need water to survive. 7. The engine that didn't need water while other cars needed radiators, hoses, and coolant to survive. The Beetle ran on air, literally. Its engine was air-cooled, meaning it relied on airflow and cooling fins instead of complex liquid systems. The result? No risk of freezing in the mountains. No boiling over in the desert. No radiator to crack. No coolant to leak. Just raw, mechanical simplicity that made the Beetle nearly unstoppable. Its engine was mounted in the rear, giving the car better traction on slippery roads, especially in snow or gravel. And because there were fewer moving parts to break, Beetles were known to keep running even after years of neglect or abuse. In fact, many of them operated in remote areas without ever seeing a mechanic. It wasn't pretty and it wasn't fast, but it worked. And it kept working. The air-cooled engine helped turn the Beetle into one of the most dependable machines ever built. It didn't just get people where they needed to go. It did so when everything else broke down. Next, think the Beetle was just a compact car? It was also a truck, and almost no one remembers. 8. The convertible pickup you've never heard of. When most people think of the Volkswagen Beetle, they picture a small, round, cheerful car buzzing down the road. But what if we told you it was once turned into a pickup truck, and a convertible one at that? In the 1950s and 60s, Volkswagen and a handful of third-party coach builders began experimenting with utility versions of the Beetle. These oddball hybrids had the classic Beetle front end and a flatbed in the back. Some were even topless. Used mostly by small businesses and farmers in Europe and South America, these models were built in tiny numbers. Some came straight from the factory, while others were custom jobs crafted by hand. But Volkswagen never promoted them. They weren't part of the brand's image, and many of these strange little trucks were eventually scrapped or forgotten entirely. Today, finding one of these convertible pickups is like spotting a unicorn. Rare, weird, and proof that even the most iconic car in history had some wild side projects. Next, the Beetle pulls off the impossible, dethroning one of the most legendary cars ever made. 9. The day the Beetle beat the Model T by the early 1970s, something unbelievable happened. The humble Volkswagen Beetle, once tied to a crumbling empire, dethroned a legend. In 1972, it officially surpassed the Ford Model T to become the best-selling car in automotive history, with over 15 million units produced.
Think about that.
In an era when America was obsessed with V8 muscle cars and roaring engines, a tiny, underpowered German import quietly took over the roads. It didn't have the speed, size, or style of its competitors, but it had something they didn't: trust. Drivers loved it for its simplicity, durability, and affordability. At its peak, Volkswagen was selling more than 500,000 Beetles a year in the US alone. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't luxurious. But it worked every time. The Beetle didn't just beat the Model T's record. It challenged what a successful car was supposed to look like and rewrote the rules. Next, one reason mechanics loved the Beetle: you could yank the engine in under 15 minutes. 10. The 15-minute engine job. Ask any seasoned mechanic what car was the easiest to work on, and chances are, they'll say the Beetle.
Why?
Because with just a few basic tools, a skilled mechanic could remove the entire engine in under 15 minutes. No joke. No computers, no sensors, no mess of wires. The Beetle's rear-mounted, air-cooled engine was so simple and modular that even hobbyists could pop it out in their backyard. It made DIY repairs and custom upgrades almost too easy. Car repair schools loved it. Students could take it apart, put it back together, and actually understand how it all worked. And if something broke, replacement parts were cheap, and repairs were fast. In a world that's now dominated by software, scanners, and sealed hoods, the Beetle was a mechanical dream, built to be used, abused, and brought back to life by anyone with a wrench. Next, long before Tesla made frunks cool, the Beetle already had one. 11. The original frunk. Decades before Tesla made the word frunk a trend, the Volkswagen Beetle had already nailed the concept. Because its engine was in the back, the Beetle featured a spacious front trunk right under the hood. It wasn't just a quirky design choice. That extra space was actually smart engineering. It held the spare tire, a toolkit, and enough room for luggage, all while helping balance the car's weight for better traction and handling. To outsiders, it looked strange. People would pop the hood and find no engine. But to Beetle owners, it was just another feature that made the car feel clever, efficient, and different. Today, automakers praise front trunks as innovation. But the humble Beetle was already doing it quietly half a century ago, without fanfare, without hype, just good, honest design. Next, the Beetle's emotional farewell, the end of a 65-year journey. 12. The last Beetle. On July 30th, 2003, the final classic Volkswagen Beetle rolled off the assembly line in Puebla, Mexico. It was painted a soft powder blue, lovingly hand-finished, and named the Ultima Edition, the last edition. But this wasn't just the end of a car. It was the end of an era. After 65 years, over 21 million units, and a journey that spanned empires, wars, revolutions, and generations, the Beetle quietly said goodbye. That final car wasn't sold to a customer. It was sent straight to Volkswagen's museum in Germany, preserved like a piece of history. Because that's what the Beetle had become, a cultural artifact, not just a machine. It began as a tool of propaganda, survived a world war, outlived its creators, and became a global symbol of peace, freedom, and resilience. It wasn't just a car. It was a survivor, a rebel, a legend. The Volkswagen Beetle was never supposed to last, but it outlived dictators, defied expectations, and drove straight into history. From darkness to light, from war to peace, it wasn't just a car. It was a revolution on wheels. If you enjoyed this journey through the Beatles' hidden past, don't forget to like, subscribe, and buckle up. More untold stories are just around the corner.